Are you seeing homeowners insurers taking extra precautions to ensure that homes are in a fire safe region, or what changes are you seeing in terms of underwriting?
Nothing yet, but we no doubt expect changes, more stringent requirements.
Uh-huh. In terms of, and do you expect prices to increase?
Oh boy, yes, yeah. So insurance, the concept of insurance is everybody pays in advance, then there's a claim, and then so they have the money to pay the claims. But these houses, are you familiar with protection classes and what that means?
Yeah. Okay,
so the houses that burned were all in a protection class 3.
Yeah.
And so they're rated to be right next to the fire department, but 2,300 of them burned down. And so insurance companies weren't getting the right amount of money for an in-house catastrophe. They expect catastrophes to be between here and Klamath Falls in the unprotected land.
Mm-hmm.
So I would expect probably 2 years of 20% compounded increases, probably.
Uh-huh.
Like 20 and 20.
If you don't mind give me a good explanation of what a protection class is.
Sure. A protection class is about response time by the closest fire departments, mm-hmm. and their ability to have capacity to fight the fire. So in town, the beauty about in town is if the fire department pulls up in front of your neighbor's house, plugs into a fire hydrant, it's already pressurized, and they just open the valve and it pushes water out the hose. Mm-hmm. Well, if it's in the sticks, then the fire department takes a lot longer to get there. And then when they get there, there are no fire hydrants, so they have to truck water. And so they have pumper trucks, which are the slowest and most, the heaviest and most difficult to manage vehicles because of the weight of the water. And then compounded on that, they burn through the water because the pumps have a big gallons per minute they pump, and then they need to have more water. Mm-hmm. So they have these collapsible bladders that look like the kind of pools that people put in their yard now, where they just set it down, and once you fill it up with water, the walls come up.
Uh-huh.
And they fill it up with water, and then they pump out of it. Meanwhile, the pumper's going back to the water source to keep dumping water into that bladder so that the fire pumps can continue to run to put out a fire. Wow. And that decreases the amount of volume of water they have to put on houses, so it increases the protection class. And that's the basic description.
Great. So you think most of the areas like Talent and Phoenix were class 3?
Yes.
And you think they'll go up to 4, 5?
So the protection class won't change. The point is that insurance companies charge less for protection class 3 than they do in 8, a 9, or a 10.
Uh-huh.
So now they recognize that they should have been getting 8, 9, or 10 money for what they were selling a PC3 for.
Ah, okay.
So now suddenly we realize how important good coverage is with the right endorsements, and we need to have a long period of time to rebuild and all those things, mm-hmm. comma. But when we have this price increase and this price increase, people will be more compelled than before to buy on price.
Yes.
And we'll go right back to the way we've been thinking. So we really have to, it's going to be our project to continue to educate the public that, I've been able to go out to building sites, walk around it with an owner, mm-hmm. hear the sadness of the fact that they lost their animals because so many people couldn't find their pets. And we've been able to give them the good professional advice on how to get ready and what to do next and what to do and all these different things. But people that bought through American Express or Costco or Geico or whoever, they don't have an advocate for them, but they offer the lowest cost coverage because they don't have a representative that gets paid commission. Mm-hmm. But the compulsion will be to go back to a low cost provider because with these increases, I can't afford to have a local agent. But we've already identified how much a difference it makes. Yes. So it'll really be a gut check for people to continue to buy the best, most comprehensive coverage as it goes up in price, because it has to.
Can we talk a little bit about debris removal coverage and additional cost of construction and all that? Are you seeing a lot of shortages in those kinds of coverage?
Not a lot, but it'll come out in the long run. So we're in phase 2. Number 1 is, oh my gosh, we have claims. We're doing a bunch of filing. Then number 2, we're out of it as the agents. The people are talking to the claims adjusters and they're going over what they have and don't have. Phase 2 is learning what they have. And phase 3 is, this is working well for me, or what do you mean I didn't have ABC? I thought I had it. And that's the phase we're moving into now, where people are understanding the nitty-gritty of whether they had enough coverage or not. Mm-hmm. And a common sales tactic by people who want to sell in volume and they think nothing will ever happen is to look at what they're competing against and then try to take things off until they can back into a lower price so they can sell the insurance.
Mhm.
Well, if companies charge extra for endorsement, it's because it has value. And so when people start paring things away to save money, that places the agents, the insurance agents, at huge risk, because when they start taking things off to sell insurance, the thinking is that if they would have told the client that I'm taking off guaranteed replacement cost, but it'll save you $50, if the clients understood that, they'll say, whether it's true or not, in desperation, they'll say, well, if I knew that, I would never have agreed to take it off. I would have paid more for the coverage. And I have no opinion about what the actual position is because I've never been desperate like that. I don't know what I would say, but it's going to be really painful for people who've been selling solely on price.
Right.
I'm guessing they're ducking and covering from phone calls, and right now we're leaning into them because our statistics are showing how well we had people prepared because our clients are overwhelmingly satisfied with what happened. There's just a couple little problems over people that have been on the books 15, 20, 25 years who don't like how it's working out, but their rep is long gone. And so there's no current, really strong relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
So they've added on to their house, but they didn't call us and tell us.
Wow.
But their agent wasn't there, and so nobody was talking to them, kind of thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that points out the value of having a good, strong relationship with your insurance broker, because as soon as anything changes in your home, whether you add on or whether you remodel, and it affects the value of your property, and you want to be properly covered. We've seen that with a few of our clients who lost everything, and the ones who had replacement value coverage. I mean, it'll take a while, but they'll either be able to rebuild or they will be able to buy something comparable, and they'll be able to replace their contents too, which is big.
Oh, you bet. Yeah. And for you guys, when you're making a recommendation to perhaps sell a house, I think the conventional wisdom is if they improve the kitchen,
Mm-hmm.
and there are certain things that they improve, then it'll have a direct impact on the popularity or attractiveness of the house itself.
Correct.
And that's a great example. If I move into a 1960s house and I got green shag carpet and brown old cabinets, that's great. But if I'm just willing to upgrade that carpet to a higher grade, and I'm willing to update my kitchen to have granite and blacks and whites and more vibrant activity, then that's a classic example of something that would render a house underinsured, because it's so expensive to upgrade the kitchen. But of course, they can have such a great ROI if they're selling.
Exactly.
So, the classic things take place. And as it applies to debris removal, demolition of the remaining parts of the structure and debris removal come out of the dwelling amount of the house.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm in my house and it's 1,000 square feet and I have it covered for $200 a square foot, I have 200,000 of coverage. But if the house burns 50%, then I still have to demolish the house because I have to meet code, and they want to approve plans until I have a reasonable property. Well, the city wants me to destroy the house and bring it all up to current 2020 codes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that demolition is expensive, and the debris removal is expensive to get rid of it all. And that's if there's no hazardous material within it. And so that just takes away. So suddenly maybe I'm insured for only $180 a square foot because so much of it, the value has been depleted by paying for demolition and debris removal. And that's a very painful time to learn that.
Mm-hmm.
And currently we have a bunch of claims. Well, I have a finite number, but we have a ton of claims. And we're waiting for soil samples, for ash debris samples to come back from the labs to determine if there are heavy metals or any asbestos particles. Because if there is, before the rain comes, then we have to do what a prudent person would do to apply sandbags and control that runoff, the pollution runoff, before it gets to the water source. Yeah, wow. So we're waiting on hundreds and hundreds of samples. Well, nobody wants to go out and put sandbags around something if there's no reason to do it. It's not free. It's not included. So we got to figure out what to do. And the rains are coming. And so it's a race to see how fast the labs can work.
Wow. Yeah, that's big. And I'm hearing numbers like it costs an average of $70,000 to clear a lot of debris. Is that reasonable in your, or?
If that's really high. So it depends. It depends how level it is, whether there was a basement, the age of construction. Because if a house burns now, it has a very low, if a 2020 house burns as soon as it's completed, because we only approve certain building materials. We have a really low pollutant rate. But a house from the 1930s, it may have had layers of lead paint, and it may have had asbestos exterior shingles. And so much, 20, 30, 40% higher. So it depends. Maybe 70% is a sample size from a group of clients, perhaps 70,000.
Wow. Wow. Well, do you have any, one of the homes that burned in Talent was a condominium. It was a condominium. Do you have any recommendations for owners of condos and townhomes with regard to fire insurance and rebuilding? And
yeah, so it's a different animal. The theory of condominiums, from my understanding, is that a person can afford, it's either affordable living or they can get more house than they can typically afford because they don't have the extra added expense of the real estate with setbacks that goes around a building. So they can maybe get more house. And so if I have a common interest in the exterior building with you and maybe another friend, maybe we have a 3-home condo. And in my experience, there are 14, in Jackson County, there are 14 different contracts for types of condominium associations. So there's no one animal. I can't speak to how it is. This is an example of how it could be. That we have, because we have a common interest in each other's exterior, that we have a common, it's called a master policy that covers the exterior of the building to a defined point in the contract. And the balance of it has to be covered by the person who owns the interior, whether or not they live in it or whether or not they own the interior and they rent it to a third party. But both of those things have to happen. We have to have a shell of a building that's covered by normally the master policy to everyone's satisfaction, and the interior has to be rebuilt. So that can take even longer to assess, to rebuild to everyone's satisfaction. Because if you are properly insured and I am properly insured, but the third party wasn't, then the master policy will build the exterior of the buildings, and then I build my interior out, you build your interior out. To all intents and purposes, my value hasn't been depleted because the outside of the building looks like everything's complete. What tenant number C does or owner number C does is up to them and their interior. They can't sell it, but they can't live in it. That's their deal. But I have an interest in the master policy because I don't want my property value to diminish because I can't rebuild because the master policy wasn't in place. So my 2 points on that are that the owners of the condominiums have a right to know what's in the master policy. So they make sure their interest is protected. And it can be hard to get a hold of the actual policy because it's provided by an agent that someone knew or that provides the master policy. But the great thing about homeowners associations or condo associations is they have a board of directors, and those people are doing their best to make sure the exterior policy is adequate and correct. But it's someone's relationship, like it's their agent that provided the coverage. If that person does their term on the board and then they sell or they pass away or they move, then that job goes to a third party and there's no relationship that remains. So I think that the individual tenants need to be able to see the master policy to see what their interest is in it, to make sure their policy is appropriate, and then to give input as to what they think is right or wrong. Condominium policies can be huge. They could be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of units, so it's a huge policy. Having all those eggs in a single basket is more risky than everybody having their own insurance like a regular neighborhood. So in that case, people need to be more interested than ever. And they need to give love to their board directors because that's a really painful job. Most people that do it won't do it a second time. So, it's people's money coming up against their happiness versus their peace and quiet. And that's a really thankless job to be on the board of directors of an HOA or COA. So, and I think they should require that their agent comes and shares with them every time there's a board turnover. The agent needs to at least Zoom or come out and present what they have and what they don't have. To make sure that everybody that's on the board is educated so that everybody knows what they have, because when the chips are down is the wrong time to learn about your coverage.
Exactly. I think I was on the board of an HOA in California that had a construction defects lawsuit. Yeah, that was a thankless job, but fortunately the association was pretty well insured.
Okay.
But it was a long process.
I love that. So dabbling in condo association insurance isn't a good idea because they're such unique creatures from an insurance standpoint. So we have a couple of competitors that do an exceptional job. Like they tend to be the typical, and I really like them and recommend them. And we have one carrier that does it too. I have a specialist that does it too. But if a person wants a quote and they call their agent and say, can I get a quote on our HOA association insurance? And that person asks any questions that don't demonstrate that they're a subject matter expert, they're really better off to keep looking. Not to put anyone down, but it's not an area you dabble in because it's such a unique creature. To consider that the outside and then the utilities that go through the studs like plumbing and electrical and insulation is all properly covered, and it abuts with no separation but no overlap with the interior policy. It needs to be handled by a professional that is willing to present themselves and give good examples and be available and things like that, because it's a big deal, your home situation. So
great. No. And so you have an expert on staff who does that?
yes, HOA insurance.
Great. Good to know. How are you dealing with all the insurance claims that are coming in? I mean, you mentioned that you're kind of getting through the hump. Have most people already filed who are going to file?
Well, we think so. There will be some people that come along later. And because we were so busy taking claims phone calls morning and night, we had a person stay overnight at the agency in case somebody showed up in the parking lot and didn't know who to call, but just desperately needed help. We worked to the weekends and so on to get all the claims filed, to get it over to the carriers so that they could start responding. And so we think most of the people that are going to file claims have done so. But some people can't, elderly folks that were in lots of affordable living, like manufactured house parks and so on, they can't find their documents, their policies. And so some of them haven't filed claims yet. Their kids are scrambling to find the documents, and the people don't know where to look. And it's kind of down below irreplaceable family items. It's down below critical documents like social security cards and things like that. But it's only now they're thinking, oh my gosh, what do you mean you haven't filed a claim yet? And so we do expect some more, but not a lot. And as people learn that their additional living expenses for having to leave their premises are covered, normally without a deductible, and spoilage for the items in their refrigerator. Nobody wants to eat sick food. And if their refrigerator or freezer were full of stock and food, then that's normally claimable, and it normally doesn't have a deductible. And so when those people they hear about those things, they'll come back and file claims, and we're happy to process them. I've been in insurance for 27 years. I've been making promises for 27 years. And I filed a claim here and a claim there and helped with this lawsuit or this rebuild. But this is the first time we've ever been able to provide service on this scale. And it's really an honor. Because we may be a sales organization, but these are important things that we do. And so we love to give information, professional advice. A person doesn't have to be a client to come and say, I'd like a third party's opinion on the rebuild cost of my house. I want to know what it would actually cost, or to figure out what their risks are. We give those reports to people and let them take it to their own agent and do it. Sometimes it's just nice to have somebody who doesn't have a dog in the fight to give professional input. And we're happy to do that. We're proud to be members of the community, and we're happy to be a part of this phase as everything gets raised back to normal and improved, actually.
Great. Can you talk a little bit more about additional living expenses?
Yes. So it's normally covered at 20% of a dwelling amount, normally. So if my house is covered for $200,000, then I probably have $40,000 of additional living expenses. And it's for anything over and above the normal living expenses. If I'm paying my mortgage normally, and I have to go to the Holiday Inn for 2 weeks while the fires subside and my neighborhood I'm cleared to go back in my neighborhood, that's 2 weeks of hotel bills that I shouldn't have had to pay that were an indirect loss due to the fire. Even if the house doesn't burn down, if I had a forced evacuation level of 3 or above and I don't have a choice, then somebody's got to pay for that motel bill. And it will almost always be covered by insurance companies without a deductible, because it's just an indirect cause of fire and I didn't do anything wrong. So that's normally what it is.
One of my clients, they had a total loss of their home and they were very well insured. They used their additional living expenses to buy an RV. So
I love that. Ooh, that's smart.
Yeah, because it will take them a while to rebuild. So
and that's a good point. When it comes to rebuild costs, just like any other industry, there are strata of providers. Tract houses, standard 3-2s in a neighborhood, custom houses, designer houses.
Mhm.
It'll be easy to find a builder to build a designer or a custom house.
Right.
It'll be easy to find tract houses because they go up so fast.
Mhm.
But this 250 to 450 range of home builder, there are a lot of them. I think they're average. They're in the middle of the bell curve, and they'll take the longest to rebuild because of the demand on the system. And contractors who live in this space don't really want to do tract homes, and they don't really want to do designer customs where the owners may have a really high expectation of service and things like that. They just want to be in this strata. It's their core competency. They're going to probably, it could take a year and a half or 2 years because of the volume of houses that need to be replaced.
Right.
And only time will tell. And when the loss of use money is out, the actual living expenses, additional living expenses, when the money is gone, it's gone. The companies aren't going to pay more.
Yeah.
And so those people just, it's kind of luck of the draw. In a way, it's, you never know what's going to happen. And so when 2,350 other homeowners are scrambling for a contractor to build their house, that's going to be the most popular zone. That and entry-level manufactured housing.
Right.
There's just going to be, we need hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them virtually overnight. And there is a very limited supply.
Mhm.
And so the factory's ramped up to 3 shifts. They're building them as fast as they can, which may or may not be a good thing.
Right.
And then there's going to be people will have to pay more than market value for them because they need them fast.
Mhm.
That type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And there were so many older manufactured homes in the area that had very little cash value.
Hmm.
It's going to be really difficult for all those people to replace those homes because you might have one that's worth 25 to 50,000, and a brand new one's going to cost you 100 plus.
Yes.
Where's that difference of money coming from? It's just going to be change the demographics and change the character of our valley, I think.
You bet. Yeah, good question. So houses of a certain age, manufactured homes of a certain age, we also put park models in that. And then mobile homes, there's kind of 3 classifications for building grades. Depending on the age of the home, replacement cost was always an option.
Mhm.
Now, I can't today, to my knowledge, put replacement cost on a 1965 house. But if it's in the 70s or newer, almost always I can find replacement cost. My people can. And so maybe somebody's had their house for 20 years. Maybe it was a 1975, and maybe the actual cash value, if what they could have covered it for was $15,000, and the policy was $500 a year. Well, maybe for $750 a year, they could have bought a policy for replacement cost. And so 50% extra, but they could have had replacement cost. Some people will have said yes to that decision, and some people would have said an extra 50%. I'm not paying an extra $250 for insurance.
Mhm.
Sometimes it would have been a good deal, and sometimes it wasn't. Everybody that I know of gets offered that because most insurance agents are on commission. We want to upsell the people to get comprehensive coverage. It costs more, and then we get paid more for it. But some people say it'll never happen to me, or I'm in town, or I'll be here temporarily, or the premium's not worth it. And so they will have taken the actual cash value option. And maybe they're in the red, or maybe they're in the black. And at the time of loss, whatever they had is what the contract they're going to get.
Yeah. Yeah, that is what it is. Anything else you can think of? I mean, one of the things I did want to talk about was the importance of shopping for coverage on quality, not price. And I think we've kind of touched on that, throughout this conversation. But do you have anything to say about the way you work with your clients and how you go through their coverage needs and make sure that they have everything that they need?
Good. So I'm a huge fan of coverage, and I recognize that insurance was designed for large claims, not nickel and dime claims.
Mm-hmm.
So I get to see a lot of claims, and I think that the expectation has risen over time that we want help with every little thing. Mm-hmm. And so we tend to quibble about the deductible, that we want the deductible to be low. But it probably costs the same, and I'm shooting from the hip. I wasn't really prepared for the question, but I could insure my house for $200 a square foot with a $1,000 deductible for the same cost as covering my house for $250 a square foot with a $2,500 deductible.
Mm-hmm.
So after a big fire, the math is easy. Yeah. But for 20 years of paying extra premiums, it may not be such an easy calculation. But I always believe in covering the best for big things. And then if I lose my house and it was worth $250 a square foot, then an extra $1,500 in deductible is literally nothing. It barely affects the calculation. It may have affected those nickel and dime claims along the way, where someone stole my laptop out of my car, which I can't now file for, or maybe someone stole tools from my shed or my bicycle. But in the long run, it cost the same in premium and it was a much better buy. So I tend to make recommendations as to how we want to have affordable insurance that covers the biggest things that can happen, not the smallest things that can happen. And that's a belief we tend to have in the agency. We're not really worried. I mean, I wouldn't say we're not worried about the little ones, but insurance wasn't designed for that. So trying to factor it into is really a challenge. It's a onesie-twosie basis. And how we work is we ask a ton of questions to try to figure out what the people actually need and what's in their best interest. And we're brokers, so we have a whole bunch of options. We have 7 primaries and then about 100 secondaries for personal lines of insurance. We can almost always get to what other people pay, or sometimes lower. And we're always competitive, but we won't always be the lowest price. But we do a good job of setting it up. We make good recommendations. We don't force insurance on people. We want to quote flood. We want to quote earthquake. We want to quote umbrella. And then people can say yes or no, or tell me more. But we're not going to shoot to be the lowest price, because we think that we would really regret it had we done that and then we had all these claims. So we're about value, and we're about part of a family's financial planning strategy. As you know, the primary home and maybe rentals are the biggest elements of most people's retirement plans. We don't want them to have to walk away empty-handed or shortchanged. So we want to cover things to the best level possible. We want to add on bells and whistles. We don't want to take them away. And so we'll give people the choices, and then we'll provide what they need. But we're always going to aim high, because it makes so much more sense to do so. And we're sleeping like babies through this process once the initial phase 1 was through. Because we know we set people up for success. We didn't nickel and dime them and then worried about what happens when the claims come in. So I know that's the way you guys work too, that when you have people, in my experience with Jeffrey and you, because you helped us with a really challenging home purchase project, you pumped the brakes and tried to get us to go slower to make sure that we knew what we were doing, rather than when I was surging ahead, you weren't trying to get me to hurry up and go. And I really appreciated that. And we work the same way. We want to make sure people know what they're getting for the next 20 years, not how fast can I get it and how cheap can it go. So it's ethically, it feels so good to be part of a community where we don't have to dodge people in a grocery store.
Yeah.
So it's great.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Russ. Can you think of anything else you'd like to add?
Oof. It's a really good time to do a coverage review with your agent. Now that the moratoriums have cleared, we're inundated with people who want to talk about their value again and to boost things up. And that's such a great value, such a great way to do it. And we all do it masked up, and we have software to help us calculate rebuild costs of a house, because we can boost it now. We just can't boost it when a moratorium goes into effect, which tends to be for weeks or months after an event. The time to get specific at that point is it's on a stay until the moratorium clears. So it's a great time for reviews.
Excellent.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
You too. Take care. Thank you.
Have a great Friday.
You too. Thank you.